Hello everyone, and welcome to this video for the Week 3 homework solution for Data Engineering Zoomcamp 2024. Let's jump right in. So here I am on the GitHub homework instructions, and if we just scroll down, we can see for this homework we will be using the 2022 Green Taxi Trip Record Parquet files from the New York City taxi data. And we do have a link to that. And actually, I can make this a little bit bigger for readability. And if we just follow that link and scroll down to 2022, the green taxi trip records are what we're going to be loading. So you would just need to get those for every month in 2022. And if we switch back to the instructions, if you're using orchestration such as Mage, Airflow, or Prefect, do not load the data into BigQuery. Using the orchestrator, stop with loading the files into a bucket. And then there's a note, you will need to use the Parquet option files when creating the external table. A little bit of setup here. Create an external table using the Green Taxi Trip Records data for 2022. And then create a table in BigQuery using the Green Taxi Trip Records for 2022. Do not partition or cluster this table. Okay, with that out of the way, let's switch back over to GCP. And here I am in my project. If I just scroll down to buckets, you can see I've created one Green Taxi data. Just seemed to make sense with the naming. And if we look inside, I have all the 2022 Parquet files. So to create the external table, I need to know where this data is located. And to do that, I can just go to configuration and grab the URI there. So switching over to BigQuery, I created a data set called taxi data. Again, just kind of seemed to make sense. And I have my saved queries here, so I don't waste time typing away. Create external table. So create or replace external table. Then the project ID, the data set, which is down here, and the name of the external table, the one I'm creating. And actually, if you're running this for the first time and the only time, you'd really need to just do create external table, but this way you can rerun it. The format per the instructions is Parquet, and the URIs is just the one that we copied from the bucket. Star says all files in that bucket. So if you had other files, you'd probably start getting errors once you queried the data. I'm not sure if it would throw an error when creating the external table. And because I have create or replace, I can just go ahead and run that again. It'll replace the table I already have. And looks like that's done. So then we need to create a table, materialized table, regular table. I'm not sure the proper way to call that. But again, I use create or replace, the project, data set, and I called this, in my case, materialized table green taxi data. And I'm going to use the external table to provide the data. So just select star from the external table. And if I run that again, you can see that those two tables are indeed present. Okay, so on to the questions. Question 1, what is the count of records for the 2022 Green Taxi data? And for this, you could have used the external table or the materialized table. I actually forget which one I used, but if we go, I use the external table and can just run that. Not sure if that's big enough. There we go. And I just did a count star counting all of the rows. And that's 840,402. And if we go look at the available answers, try to give it a nice spread here. just so it kind of stood out. But 840,402 is the answer for question 1. So question 2, write a query to count the distinct number of pickup location IDs for the entire data set on both the tables. What is the estimated amount of data that will be read when this query is executed on the external table and the table? Okay. So let me close these out. And for record counts, not record counts, bytes processed. Question 2. And I just have these commented out. So for the external table, you can just control whack the slash that's with your question mark key typically, and that comments out, uncomments out if you have multiple queries. But we can see up here the estimated amount is 0 bytes. So if I comment that and uncomment the materialized table, okay, that's estimating 6.41 megs. So if we switch back to the possible answers, 0 for the external, 6.41 for the materialized table is the answer for question 2. Okay, question 3. How many records have a fair amount of 0? All right. Again, you could have used either table. The materialized table is probably going to perform quite a bit better. And the result is 1,622. So looking back at the possible answers, 1,622. All right, question 4. What is the best strategy to make an optimized table in BigQuery if your query will always order the results by pickup location ID and filter based on LPEP pickup date time? And then create a new table with this strategy. So a few things to pick up on here. When you see filter, that's going to be where. And when you think of a where clause, think of having to read less data. And what lets us read less data, that's partitions, where you kind of chop up the data into smaller chunks so that less has to be read. And then when you hear order, that's more clustering, the order in which the data is stored. So for this one, it makes sense to partition by the pickup date time and cluster by the pickup location ID. And then we can create that table. Just create or replace table. Again, if you're not going to rerun this, you could have just done create table and project data set. What you want it to be called, I called this green taxi partition table. What are we partitioning by? This actually needs to be converted to a regular date. Maybe a little gotcha, but if that hung you up, you could have asked in the Slack and gotten the answer there. And then cluster by the pickup location ID. And again, could have used both the external or the materialized table. Both would have had the same result. All right. Question 5. Write a query to retrieve the distinct pickup location ID between pickup date time 6/1/2022 and 6/30/2022 inclusive. Use the materialized table you created earlier in your from clause and note the estimated bytes. Now change the table in the from clause to the partition table you created for question 4 and note the estimated bytes processed. What are these values? All right. Again, you can comment, uncomment queries in the same window here to kind of get the estimated bytes. So first we could do the partitioned, and it looks like that's going to process 1.12 megs, thereabouts. And then if we look at our materialized table, 12.82 megs. So if we switch back here, the answer we were looking for, 12.82 megs for the non-partition table and 1.12 megs for the partition table. And question 6, where is the data stored in the external table you created? Well, as you saw, we gave it the URI for the storage bucket because it needs to know where those files are that it's going to read. So they're not stored in BigQuery. They are stored in the GCP bucket. Bigtable has to do with NoSQL, isn't covered in this course. Container registry has to do with Docker containers, I believe. So probably could have done process of elimination, but GCP bucket is the answer to question 6. So question 7, it is best practice in BigQuery to always cluster your data. In the video, as Ankush mentioned, this is not the case. I believe he stated if your data is less than 1 gig, clustering is going to create some metadata associated with that table and give you some overhead that kind of outweighs the costs of any performance boost you would get from clustering. So the answer to question 7 is false. And something I kind of came across, I knew, then forgot, and relearned. So no points, write a select count star query from the materialized table you created. How many bytes does it estimate will be read and why? So if I just come here, I'm just going to copy that for the materialized table and change that to count star. So why would that be that it's not going to read any bytes when it counts the number of rows? Well, I was curious, and if you go down here to the materialized table and just open that up, and it makes sense. If you scroll down here, number of rows, it knows because it's stored in BigQuery how many rows it has. So if you just select count star, it's not really going to read the data. It's going to look at its metadata and say, oh, here's the count. If you want to compare that to the external table, you can open that up, and you notice that data isn't tracked because that's not in BigQuery. It does not have that metadata. So that is it for week 3. Hopefully you all enjoyed, and we will see you in week 4.